Now what we're going to do is we're going to be writing sine and cosine equations. We've been given an equation and we've been graphing sine and cosine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be given a graph and we have to come up with the equation. Now, we're going to be finding our A, our B, and our C values. First thing that I like to do is start off with my C value. That's the middle of the graph, that's the midline, and that's what we're going to add or subtract. Next thing that I do is I look at my amplitude. That's the distance from the middle, the midline, to the peak. The amplitude is always the absolute value of A. A can be positive or negative. If it's going in the normal direction, then it would be positive. If it's going in the opposite direction that it normally goes, then it would be negative. And the last thing I do is find my B value. And how I find my B value is the frequency, and it's 2 pi over the period. Why that works is because we already learned that the period is equal to 2 pi over B. So if we solve for B, we multiply each side by B, the B's cancel. Then in order to get the B by itself, we divide each side by the period. So we get 2 pi over the period. Now, looking at our function, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide, is this a sine or cosine curve? And I see that it starts in the middle, so I know that it's sine. So y equals, and I'm going to put sine. My midline, if I look at it, is right in the middle. So that would be plus 0. Obviously, I don't have to put plus 0, but I'm just kind of walking you through the A, B, and C values. Leave a little bit of space. Next thing I'm going to do is from the midline to the peak is a distance of 4. And so that would be 4 sine. And notice that my period is 2 pi. So in order to find the frequency, that's my B value. So B is equal to 2 pi over 2 pi, which of course is 1. So that would be 1 theta or just theta. And that's my equation. So when we're looking at the next one, I have to decide if this is sine or cosine, and I know that it's cosine because it's starting at the top. So it's my cosine equation. I'm going to look for the midline. This is a little bit difficult. I have 5, I have negative 3. If I'm not sure what it is, what I could do is I can add them up and divide by 2. Just like in geometry, when you're finding the midpoint, we add up the x's and divide by 2. If we're trying to find the midline, we add up the max and the min and divide it by 2. So 5 plus negative 3 divided by 2 gives me 2 over 2, which is 1. So that means my midline is at 1. So that means I'm going to add 1 to my sine or cosine curve. From the middle to the peak, from 1 to 5 is 4. So that means my A value is 4. And when I'm trying to find my frequency, my B value, I take 2 pi divided by whatever the period is. In this case, it's pi. And so my answer is 2. So I'm going to put 2 theta. When we're looking at letter C, this time it's not starting at the top, it's starting at the bottom. So I know that I have a cosine curve, and I know that my cosine curve is going to be negative because it's going in the opposite direction. When I'm looking at this, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find my midline. So 8 and negative 2, if I go 8 plus negative 2 divided by 2, that would be 6 over 2, which is 3. So my midline is at 3. So I'm going to be adding 3. And then from 3 to 8, that would be a distance of 5. Once again, it's a negative 5 because cosine is going in the opposite direction that it normally does. And then when I'm looking for my B value, I see that the period is pi over 2. So in order to find my B value, it's 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Keep, change, flip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the 2 pi the same. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2 over pi. Pi's cancel. 2 times 2 is 4, so that would be 4 theta. Pause the video and try the next 3 on your own. So for letter D, first thing that I want to do is state what the trig ratio is. And I see that it's starting at the top and going down. So that tells me it's cosine. So I go y equals cosine. Next, I'm going to find my midline. I have the 2 and the negative 10. If I add them up and divide by 2, it'd be negative 8 divided by 2, which is negative 4. So that means my midline is somewhere at negative 4. In order to find my amplitude, it's from negative 4 to the peak, which is a distance of 6. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find my B value. That's the frequency. So what I do is I take 2 pi over my period, which of course in this case is pi. So that would be 2. Letter C, if I'm looking at this, I notice that it's starting in the middle. If it's starting in the middle, that means it's sine. So I go y equals sine, but notice that it's going in the opposite direction. Instead of it going up, it's going down. So I know it's a negative sign. I'm going to find my midline. I have 7 and negative 11. So if I take the 7 plus negative 11 and divide it by 2, that's negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2. So I'm going to subtract the 2. Then from negative 2 to the peak, from 2 to 7, of course, would be 9. So that means it's negative 9 sine. And then I see that my period is 4 pi. So in order to find my frequency, I take the 2 pi over the 4 pi. Pi's cancel. 2 over 4 is a half. So I'm going to put a half theta. Our last one, I see that it's starting at the bottom and going up. That tells me it's cosine. And since it's starting at the bottom, I know it's negative cosine. With my midline, I see 5 and negative 3. So if I add up 5 plus negative 3 and divide it by 2, that would be 2 over 2, which is 1. So I know that my midline is at 1. And from the 1 to the 5 is a distance of 4. So it's negative 4 cosine. I'm going to take in order to find my frequency, I'm going to take my 2 pi. I'm going to divide it by my B value, which is pi fourths. Keep, change, flip. I have 2 pi times 4 over pi. Pi's cancel. And I have 2 times 4, which is 8. So my B value is 8.